The Honourable Steve Clarke is Ontario's Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing. He represents the riding of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes and has served as a provincial member of parliament since 2010. The Honourable Steve Clarke served as mayor of Brockville from 1982 to 1991. He was first elected at the age of 22 and was the youngest mayor in Canada at the time. Quite an accomplishment, sir.
Thank you.
He was appointed Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs in Ontario's Progressive Conservative government in September 2018 and is moving ahead at a fast pace with his portfolio. Best wishes to you, sir, and welcome to our studio.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
First thing, in September 2018, you introduced a legislation to slash the size of the Toronto Council, which has created quite a lot of controversy. Has it all been resolved?
You know, I believe when Bill 5 was passed, we did it with a lens to try to stop the dysfunction at Toronto City Council.
Sure.
We want to work with the City Council on very important issues like housing, infrastructure, transportation, and we felt that we needed to have a council that worked effectively and efficiently. I think we accomplished that, and I'm very pleased with the way that Bill 5 has been implemented. And I think most people agree that since its implementation, people like the new streamlined council.
Are there any court cases, court challenges going on about
Well,
this?
there was at the time that the court originally had dealt with the matter one way and then it was turned over. So the matter is still being debated. However, the legislation passed the House. It was implemented, as most people know, during last fall's municipal election. And again, I think when you look back on that year, most people are feeling that 25-person council was a good decision. So I'm glad that we were able to move forward.
Is it true that the Ford government has drastically cut funding to municipalities in various areas?
No, I think there were 3 areas where municipalities felt that they didn't have enough time to adapt. These were things like childcare, public health, and land ambulance. So the Premier pressed the pause button. We're engaging our municipal partners right now on those 3 areas. We respect the fact that our fiscal year, which starts on April 1, is different than other municipal years. They run on a calendar budget from January 1st to December 31st. We meet with them regularly. We have regular monthly meetings with both the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and also the City of Toronto through some consultation agreements. And we'll continue to have those dialogues with municipalities as we move forward and as they get closer to their budget. But I do want to correct something that people seem to forget, and that's to 405 of Ontario's 444 municipalities. We were able to provide those municipalities with a collective $200 million to look at ways that they could perhaps have a shared service agreement with another municipality if they decided they wanted to help with some IT improvements to make themselves more effective and more efficient. So, I would always caution people for talking about cutting back, because for those 405 municipalities, that those monies were welcomed and they were unconditional. We didn't put any strings on them. We suggested that they use it for efficiencies, to make them more effective, to look at their decision making and move forward in that way. So, I think if you drill down and talk to some of those communities, they would be very happy. And in addition, the other 39 municipalities, we provided a $7.35 million fund that allowed them to do a line-by-line review, just like the Ontario government did. So I think we are providing a lot of funding for municipalities, but at the same time, we're taking some of those programs, the 3 I mentioned earlier, pressing the pause button and having a good consultation process with them.
Coming to this Greenbelt, there's a lot of talk going around about that too, that the government is sort of accommodating real estate developers and trying to shrink the Greenbelt. Is there some truth in that?
No, I want to be unequivocal. The Premier and I have said this many times, and I'll say it again. We will protect the Greenbelt in its entirety. Any of our initiatives, whether it be a place to grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, any of our changes regarding more homes, more choice, Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan, or even something like our community housing renewal strategy, all of them maintain extremely strict environmental controls, very much geared towards health and safety. But again, I want to reiterate, in terms of the Greenbelt, none of our proposed policies affect the Greenbelt in any way, shape, or form. We will continue to protect the Greenbelt in its entirety.
But what about the agricultural lands? I mean, the new residential zoning, wouldn't those cut into these farmlands?
No. I think what we've tried to do in A Place to Grow, a growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, is we've tried to take a premise, and this is something we heard throughout all of our consultations over and over and over again. People felt that we should provide intensification and increase our density around major transit station areas. By doing so, it will affect to not have the sprawl that people are so concerned about. And by not having the sprawl, it does provide greater protections to agricultural properties. So anytime someone within an Peel region, there's a significant amount of transit infrastructure that's either being built or proposed. So those are the areas where intensification needs to take place. And I think most people agree that if you were making major investments in transit, you want to have affordable housing near there. You want to be able to have that higher density, that bigger intensification around major transit station areas, because that's where people want to live, and that's the policies that we heard throughout our consultation.
About this now, housing, coming to housing, you have a plan for subsidized housing, or is it only confined to the GTA, or is it in other municipalities too?
Well, any time we look at housing, we have to talk about housing supply. And I think anyone who wants to look at what's happening in the GTA or what's happening in Peel region, you look at the average resale of a home across all types in the GTA, it's averaging about $838,000. The average price of a detached home in Mississauga is around $1 million. In Brampton, it's around 850,000, and then also you look at the average rents that people have to pay. So you look at an average one-bedroom condominium apartment would be about $2,100 a month, and then in Brampton it's probably around, for a one-bedroom rental, it's probably around $1,700 a month. So what we have to do is we have to deal with supply, and we have to put policies in place that are going to encourage more purpose-built rental, and we've done that. We lifted rent controls on new construction as of November 15th, while at the same time providing strong protections for rent control for existing tenants. We want to have more purpose-built rental, and we put policies in place under the More Homes, More Choice Act to try to encourage more rental construction, more nonprofit construction, things like Habitat for Humanity. And then also look at providing that more choice. Some of the things like the missing middle that is required. On community housing, we've spent about $1 billion this year on community housing. We want to not just sustain and repair, we also want to grow our stock of community housing across all sectors in our province. And we have to send a clear message that community housing matters, and I think we've done that with the community housing renewal strategy. We want to make it easier and simpler to calculate rents. We want to make sure that people aren't penalized for trying to get ahead, to try to get education, or even someone who's receiving child support. We shouldn't be penalizing those people. So I think it's very important as a government that we send a clear signal, and I think $1 billion is a clear signal to people that we value our community housing. But we're not one and done. You can't just do one initiative like A Place to Grow or the Community Housing Renewal Strategy or More Homes, More Choice Act. You can't just do one or two or three things and expect that you're going to solve the problem. This is something that we really need to do collaboratively. We need to work with municipalities. We need to work with home builders. We need to work with the not-for-profit sector. But we also have to work with people who build homes. and I think
Yeah,
that's the sweet
But
spot.
in this, the current laws, they favor the tenants, isn't it? Maybe that's why the landlords don't want to
No,
build.
no, I think the one thing that we tried to do in the consultation, and I think we were successful, we had about 2,000 submissions as part of the More Homes, More Choice, Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan consultation. And we broke it down into 5 themes, speed, cost, mix, rent, and innovation. So rent was a very important part of it, and we heard from tenants who asked for stronger consumer protection, but we also heard from landlords about how they felt some of the regulations made it harder for them to deal. So we are working with the Attorney General on trying to make some improvements in the landlord-tenant process in terms of the tribunal. We are very cognizant that we need to go back out for further consultation, so we are going to be having some more consultation this summer and in the fall to listen to community groups about things like the provincial policy statement and also some measures that we can put in place in terms of another bill. It goes back to what I said before. You can't just do one bill, and I'm a realist. People aren't just going to pat me on the back and say, well, Minister, you solved the housing supply crisis. No, this is something we have to keep working on.
It's a difficult file, yes.
It's a very difficult file, and one that I think, again, we need to cooperate with people, we need to consult, and we need to realize that that it can't be a one and done. You can't just place one initiative, whether it be a regulation or a policy change. Every time our government does something, every policy, every program, every service change, we have to put people first. And this is exactly what we're doing with the Housing Supply Action Plan.
What about this disaster management plan? I think that comes under your ministry.
I have two sections.
So fires and floods and everything is in place.
So I have 2 programs. I have the Disaster Recovery Assistance for Ontarians, the DREO program. That's the policy that deals with individual homeowners, small business, or farms. I also have the Municipal Disaster Assistance Program, the MDRA program. That looks after sort of that municipal infrastructure. Both programs are very, very important.
Is it done through the municipalities or is it done through the government itself?
So we will send a team out to look at a municipality for the disaster relief. We'll first activate the DREO program, the homeowner program for homeowners, businesses, and farms. And then if there is significant municipal infrastructure damage, then we'll work with the municipality on the MDRA program. Recently, I was in Muskoka and announced a pilot project of $1 million to look at how, when we deal with that municipal infrastructure, if we can build it back better. So if we can look at sort of a resiliency piece to ensure, based on some of the climate challenges that we've had, that we can build it back to a better standard. The last thing I think we need to do is to keep rebuilding that road or rebuilding that bridge only to have it, for example, washed out every couple of years. We need to build it back to a better standard. So those programs are very important programs to the ministry, and we are continue to respond to programs regarding some of the spring flooding that we've had. And in the past, for example, just after I was sworn in as minister last year, it was the tornadoes that we experienced in Ottawa, which was literally about an hour away from my home. But it's something that it's an all-of-government approach. We work collaboratively with other ministries to get on the ground and to help people.
I think. What about this demand by Mayor Bonnie Crombie for making Mississauga a standalone city? I mean, she wants to break away from the Peel region. I mean, what is the ministry decision on that?
So regional government, which includes Peel Region, has been an area of government that's been in existence for almost 50 years, since the early 70s. So I made an announcement last August at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario Conference, or AMO, that we were going to do a regional government review, that after almost 50 years, it's time to look again at the level of government and really look at what's working and maybe what hasn't worked so well. So I appointed 2 very distinguished individuals, 2 individuals with extreme credentials, very well-respected people in the municipal field, Ken Sealing and Michael Fenn. And those two advisors have been out having consultations in the 82 affected municipalities within the regions, plus the county of Simcoe. And it's interesting, when the online submissions, the public submissions closed in mid-May, I think it was May 21st that they closed, we've received over 8,500 submissions from the public. Tremendous amount of submissions from the public. In addition, probably 100 or so proposals from different community groups. So right now, my two advisors are looking at all of the feedback. They'll hand me their recommendations sort of midsummer, and then I'll review them over the summer with my cabinet colleagues. Yeah. And we'll have more to say in the weeks ahead.
What do you personally feel? I mean, because I think amalgamation is the need of the hour. And I think smaller cities should come together to form mega cities. That is, I think, the way to the future.
So here's my take on that. So I want to make it very clear as minister that I had no preconceived outcomes. So I really wanted the communities to have their say. I wanted people to feel free to be able to tell me what they think has worked well over the 50 years in terms of our regional government system. And I want them to give me some suggestions. So when you say the word amalgamation, I want to make it clear there were three lenses that I asked my advisors to look at. And that wasn't one of the lenses. So it was looking at service delivery, at governance, and decision making. And those were the three things that I asked them to look at, because I think it was very important for us to look at the way the regions are working with the individual member municipalities and how well or how it's being challenged on how service delivery and decision making is being made. I think the number one thing I wanted to hear was I wanted to hear from people how they think they've been able to change over time. Because let's face it, over 50 years, we've seen tremendous growth in our regions, and I don't think anybody can deny about that. So I haven't had any preconceived outcome. There wasn't anything that I said that I wanted to see at the end. I truly wanted communities, their local mayors, their local councils, their regional councils, community groups that are affected to feel open to be able to share their views with the region. So I had nothing that I gave as a preconception. I didn't say this is the outcome I wanted. I wanted it to be a true open consultation process.
So in the end, a referendum or something, is that a good idea?
I happen to feel that I made some very good choices with my two advisors. I am going to take my time to review the documents, just because it was such a popular consultation. We also have to be mindful that we still have 3 years in this municipal term, so any changes that we would make would have to be done for the 2022 municipal election. So we do have some time, but we also have some opportunity to sit down with our municipal partners, and for me to sit down with my cabinet and my caucus colleagues to look at some of the recommendations. So there's more to come.
Anything else you would like to tell our viewers about your housing portfolio?
No, I want to make it clear that making sure that the Ministry of Housing and our government is responsive to people's needs. One of the things that I heard over and over again, and I'm sure you would hear the same from Premier Ford if he was here, or any members of our government, we have people who right now can't realize the dream of home ownership. That you've got a young millennial couple that really doesn't see a path to home ownership right now because of some of the costs that I talked about, some of the lack of supply. You have seniors that are looking at selling their home and transitioning to another accommodation, and they can't see an option after they resell that home that's viable for them long term. You've got people who desperately want to live where they work, and they can't see that. People that spend hours and hours away from their family commuting on an everyday basis. So we've got to provide more housing, and we have to provide more choice. We've got to be able to intensify around major transit station areas, and we've got to work with our partners to be able to have affordable housing involved in some of those components. So it's a big job for our government. We've done a tremendous amount so far in just 1 year in office on the housing file, but there's much more for us to do. So, my message is we want to hear from you. We want to work with you. We've got some incredible MPPs here in Peel Region, and I just can't thank them enough for all the feedback that they've given me as minister. This is a big portfolio, and it's very important for our government. So I really want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be in your studio today and to be able to talk about all the great things our government is working on.
Well, we have just heard from the Honourable Steve Clarke, Minister for Housing and Municipal Affairs, the Government of Ontario. And he has given us an insight into the workings of his portfolio and his ministry and all the things that he has been doing with the file. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Minister, sir.
Thank you.